Hello. I am Andy. I am the owner and operator of the Growth Arc, and it is really awesome to see you all here. It's been a long time since I've logged in live, and today we are going to be welcoming Mia Schachter for our live, who I see just popped in and is going to request to join us. Mia is someone I met in a class with Minachi a couple months ago, and we were in a little breakout session together, and we had some lull time because our group was like on point about whatever we were supposed to be talking about. And then all of a sudden Mia and I were like, wait, you know that person, you know that, you do this. And then we were like, oh my gosh, we do kind of some of the same work and different things in different areas of the same work. But I am really excited to have Mia here, and I'm going to bring them on. About their upcoming course, 6-week course on consent and boundaries. Hi!
Hi. Hello.
Hello!
I'm just realizing that I want to have this actually maybe up on a list.
Yeah, it's so hard to figure out when it's like split screen because like
I know when it splits, you have to like recenter yourself and everything.
yes, and I like when we talked before, I'm like in this really sunny spot because it's an actual sunny day here and I have to like take advantage of it. So we're just gonna deal with these like little lines and this brightness.
Look, and my son creeping this way too. So
Good. Yes. Well, I started out just right away doing a little bit of introduction because one thing that I've been noticing, and I'm sure it's changed now, but one thing I noticed about people saving lives is it's kind of funny to have that first few minutes where people are like, just waiting, because that only works for live. It doesn't really work for when you save it. And so our intent is to save this for other people to watch later. And then I'm going to send it over to Mia so that she can use it too. But I gave a little bit of a brief introduction to how our paths crossed, but I would love for you to let the audience know a little bit about your background, how you got to be the consent wizard, which I think is the most amazing handle. And one of the reasons why when we first connected and I saw that it was consent wizard, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So feel free to let us know about you.
okay. Thanks, Andy. So Mia Schachter. I use they them pronouns, and I trained a couple of years ago now, or almost 2 years ago now, to be an intimacy coordinator for TV and film, which is very similar to a stunt coordinator. Obviously, our content is different. We're dealing with simulated sex and nudity on screen. So, and I also do some work in theater as well. That's in the theater. We're called intimacy directors instead of coordinators, which is something of an arbitrary distinction and not really worth getting into here. What happened for me was that I was dealing with a ton of autoimmune and gut like related chronic illness stuff, and I was my whole life. And as I got into coordination, a lot of training for that was becoming trauma informed. As I was learning about that, I also was like, whoa, a lot of this applies to me, and it makes a lot of sense that, you know, I'm dealing with these things. And then about a month or two into training for intimacy coordination, I finally got diagnosed with 4 or 5 different things, depending on how you look at it. And so the path of healing my gut for me was very wrapped up in like getting in touch with my boundaries and healing my emotional trauma. And what I've found since then is, and like through learning about polyvagal theory and stuff, is that consent contributes so greatly to our internal sense of safety and also our safety externally in our relationships. So consent was so impactful for me and learning about boundaries and stuff. And so I started kind of developing like something of a private practice to help other people get in touch with that stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously my lens of, like kind of, I guess what I do that might be a little bit different from other consent educators is like I really do take into account the gut brain axis,
Mm.
because of my experience with that. Um, and then so I started working with people one on one, and then and teaching live a bit, and then COVID hit, and so it all moved online, and production shut down, of course. And so now I have I teach classes online. I'm offering a 6-week course coming up, and I also see clients one on one. And I'm also just realizing that maybe I should pin my maybe am I able to do that if I like pin my website and my Instagram? Am I able to do that? Let's see.
I always need to learn how to do these things better, so I apologize.
No. So let
I
me
might
see.
be able to pin it. Let me
Maybe
see.
you can pin it. Can you pin it if you like
Yes,
hold
I
it
can.
down?
Yay! We-
Job. Okay, and then the consent wizard. I love that question because it's kind of funny. The like parallel that I realized is that I used to be a ceramicist, and I would always kind of joke that I was the Harry Potter. Ugh. And take that or leave that, whatever you feel like. And then many years later, a few months ago, I was like, my having my handle be my name just like isn't really working. And I was also sort of coming to terms with like truly some magical experiences that I had had, and like some abilities that I had that I was seeing manifest. And I was like, there's a little more to this than like, haha, I'm psychic. Like it was this kind of thing that I laughed off, and it became really clear that like the things that I write come true, and like
Mm.
that's happening. Um, and then I work with a witch, and like so practicing spells with them and like rituals and stuff. And that ritual also like makes its way into my work a lot privately with clients. So I landed on the consent wizard, and it's a little like cheeky and silly, but it's actually a bit deeper than that, and like based in I really do identify as some kind of wizard or magical. There's something magical going on.
I love that. I am also super into magic and rituals and all of that stuff. And I think getting in tune with yourself, as you were saying about your journey with, your gut and having to figure all that out, it makes a lot of sense that you would land on the wizard. And I love wizards. I'm a huge, I love the Harry Potter series, but I was more of a Lord of the Rings wizard person.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so I really, really just like love that. And my son and I play Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering, and so we like are super into that. So that's why I was like, oh, cool, like consent wizard. That's so awesome. But yes, but as some people that are here have seen, I know that I posted a couple days ago a little bit of info on my page about your class, and so
Mm-hmm.
briefly mentioned that you have an upcoming. Is this the first time you've offered this 6-week course?
Yeah, I've done like one-off classes. I've done one-off classes specified to certain groups. Like I did one for actors and one for directors and one for writers and one for producers, and then one kind of for everyone. And I'm talking to some people about developing. Oops. I'm talking to some people about developing one. Hang on, my cat is Lucy. Um, she's trying to eat the stuff in the sink drain.
Oh,
Um,
good.
yeah, I mean that's my fault for not throwing it in the trash. So I'm also talking to people about offering one for dancers. I offered one through the Free Speech Coalition for adult film directors and adult film performers separately. So this is the first 6-week course that I've done where at all, and everyone is welcome. So like regardless of your background, it's open to anybody.
Yeah, and what I know that you have a really awesome info like page around why you chose 6 weeks, and what are some of the themes that will be happening in that 6-week course?
Great question. Okay, so I have found from doing this um, work now for a year or so with in terms of like the working privately with people. I think 6 weeks is kind of the shortest amount of time where you can expect to see a change in like your habits and your speech and like the world. All this information is available on my site, and I offer an intro class that can be downloaded or streamed. And it's like an hour or so, and it's kind of like an info dump of like the frameworks that we're going to be going over in that 6 week course. But if you're not practicing it and really like integrating it into how you engage with people and also how you engage with yourself, then it's like great info, but it doesn't really become incorporated into like your body. And I think that's the thing about consent that I feel like gets lost a lot of times in the like no means no kind of rhetoric around it, is that it's really a language and like a way of being in the world and a practice. And so if you're not in the practice, just like a language or an instrument, you get rusty or you completely forget. So in terms of what we're going to be going over in that class, we're going to go over Planned Parenthood's FRIES, which is an app that they came up with. We're going to be going over a framework that I made up that I call the Yes to No Spectrum, which is on my page.
Yes.
And also the Wheel of Consent, which is Betty Martin's framework. And then a lot of practice, like a lot of breakout rooms of practicing saying no and really slowing down and noticing, like, where do you feel that?
I have to do the same thing for my I love that.
One cat, and then it was the other cat. Now they've both, and this is my discipline tool. So we're gonna go over those 3 frameworks. We're also gonna be looking at media examples. We're gonna be looking at someone else here has a cat who's like familiar with this. We're gonna be doing a lot of exercises, some that I made up myself, some that I'm kind of like amalgamating from other places in my life and work that I've done. And a lot of like journaling. A lot of this is really about slowing down and noticing what comes up. And it's a trauma-informed approach. So we're going to be doing a lot of that work as well. I've like been compiling a lot of resources that I like about attachment theory and polyvagal theory. Like I all the respect in the world to Stephen Porges, but hard to like listen to him for an hour, like and also I guess where I find his work to be just not quite what I'm looking for is that he doesn't really seem to account for like identity power differentials. So I've compiled resources that like sort of feel aligned with my work and my community and my audience. Like I found this queer zine on attachment theory, and like that's why I want to be learning about attachment theory as opposed to like reading the whatever huge book on like the studies that they've done and stuff. So it's going to be like a sort of crash course in like being trauma informed around consent specifically.
I love that. And because I know it had the title of your course has like consent and boundaries together. So where do you see the connection to the two? Because to me, like you can talk about, when I do work with clients, we talk a lot about consent and a lot about boundaries. And that's where in my little blurb, when I posted your stuff, I wrote like, I can guide people and I know a lot about it, but I don't consider myself an expert. I haven't ever dove completely into both of those things specifically. So why is it important for you to put the words, boundaries and consent together?
That's a cool question. I think it's funny too, like I also was asked that yesterday and was like, come up with like a concise answer to that.
Yeah.
I think, boundaries is like very, very simply, if I'm like really simplifying this, boundaries are internal
Hmm.
and is like the interpersonal aspect.
Yeah.
There is something I have a whole class called self-consent and the
Mm.
like yes, we absolutely need to be getting consent from ourselves, but we first have to be able to like recognize what our boundaries are not necessarily what they are, because I think that boundaries are like mutable and porous and context dependent, relationship dependent, time of day dependent. You know,
Absolutely.
may go for a walk when the sun is out, but not when the sun is down. You know,
Mhm.
um, and uh, so boundaries are these kind of like pieces that are like moving around. Um, and sometimes they're negotiable and all that stuff. The key to boundaries, like a question that I get a lot is, how do I even know what my boundaries are?
Mhm.
My answer is you can't.
Right.
You really what you want to get in touch with is what they feel like, because your boundaries can change. My boundaries with my mom are different from my boundaries with a stranger walking down the street, obviously. So so my if my boundaries are shifting and changing, then what's crucial is the ongoing practice of consent, so that we're always checking in about those boundaries and not assuming that the same boundaries exist in one container versus another container. Like you might have boundaries around like public displays of affection that are going to be different at like your family Christmas gathering versus like at the park or
Yeah.
something. So
Yeah.
boundaries are shifting and changing, and it's really like the piece that I try to help clients and students find is like, what do your boundaries feel like, so that
Mhm.
you know when you're coming up against one, and then being in the practice of communicating them, so expressing them, and then maintaining them and holding them, and making sure that you've like built the structure so that they don't wobble when someone just blows on them very lightly. This is like this
Right.
metaphor. um, and then consent is the ongoing practice of like gauging boundaries, reading boundaries, sharing boundaries, expressing boundaries, holding them, etc.
I love that. Yes. Um, I definitely have different boundaries depending on the day. So I think that that was a good thing to bring up, and something that I don't think a lot of people think of. So that's stuff where I would like, I'm really excited about you doing this course, and I'm really excited to, bring this course to the Growth Arc audience, and really like recommend you because of all of this you're sharing with us now, and from where we met, because I think you also, the how you touched on that there isn't in polyvagal stuff, there's not enough touched on with power dynamics. And I think like when we met in Minachi's class around NVC, specifically talking about that is a very important part of all of that conversation. So I'm glad to hear you're bringing that in too. I know that I had asked you, so like why would it be important for someone individually to take this course?
um okay, so uh what I think this course is going to be really fitting for anyone who feels like a people pleaser. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
Eric, see Erica in here. Yeah, anyone who feels like a people pleaser, or often feels like taken advantage of by other people. Especially, I think what happens a lot is like for those of us who find ourselves in like serving professions,
Mm-hmm.
um, we can, if we're not in touch with our own limitations of what we have to offer, so like if we're not in touch with our own resources, and like when we're feeling depleted, we often end up resenting other people for taking too much because we haven't set the boundaries, or we have and we haven't held them. um,
Mm-hmm.
and then we end up like just cutting people out of our lives, being like, well, you're just really I I need a second.
You're fine. I totally I think that's a very, very important thing for people to pay attention to, and that's why I don't know if it caught it on camera, but I was really like, oh my gosh, self consent, and that is a huge thing that comes up for me when I'm coaching. Like a lot of people will either say they don't know what their boundaries are, or they don't know like how to speak their boundaries. But also, I get a lot of, which is connected to boundaries. It's like, I don't know what I want. I don't know how to speak for what it is that I desire.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the second piece to the like the people pleasing thing is that I think there's a lot of us. I mean, and I say I speak in the collective because I experience both. So I think for a lot of us, like when we're not in touch with our desire or it's not conscious yet, we'll do this kind of like manipulation to get what we want by pretending that what we're doing is making an offer instead of a request.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to feel someone, I mean, this is Betty's example. If I want to feel someone up, but I'm like afraid to ask for that, I might say, do you want a massage?
Mm.
And then I'm touching them, and then I'm hoping that it'll just like organically morph into other thing. Um,
Yes.
so, so you asked like who would benefit from this class. I think there's a lot of people who really struggle to say no, and I'm one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's also a lot of people who find that like other people are saying, you don't take no for an answer, or you're kind of pushy, and they're like, wait, how is that possible? Like uh, I feel like I'm doing everything for you.
Yeah.
When we're finding ourselves kind of confused about those dynamics, yeah, for people who are finding themselves confused about those dynamics or like perpetually in habits of like codependency,
Mm-hmm.
of feeling depleted, burnt out. Those are people who are really going to like this class. And the other piece that has come up more recently from clients and students like sharing this with me, and I felt this intuitively, but they've really given language to it, is that this work is so nourishing and nurturing for your creative brain. What
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about particularly is like just suddenly feeling like they have so much more space for their creative endeavors, and not just space for it, but like lust for it. um,
Yeah.
I've felt the same thing. Like
Mm.
I have so much less resistance to doing creative things, and my theory as to why that is has to do with like a combo of polyvagal theory and attachment theory, which is that, and Minachi talks about how you need to feel safe in order to play.
Yeah.
And if consent contributes to that sense of safety and externally, then it makes total sense that as a result of cultivating this practice in an ongoing way, um, frees up the potential for creativity and play and like imagining and exploration that way, because we feel safe in our own bodies. We trust ourselves not to push ourselves past our limits, and we also trust ourselves like in situations to advocate for ourselves, kind of regardless of like what gets thrown at us.
Absolutely. I love that because I just read, it could have been something you shared also. So I really saw I saw a really awesome post around something of like, if you really want to help me trust you, like say no to me,
It was
like
posted.
was like, who shared that? Had to have been you. Like, that's so wild. And then the connection with Minachi saying, and I remember Minachi saying that in class, like being, oh my gosh. Because my other question was like, if individuals take this, like, how will the collective, like when individuals practice this work and practice learning this about themselves, how does the rest of the world benefit?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. Because I do think that the more people who have this information, the better the world will be. And so I
Yeah.
sometimes get a little torn about like, um, charging for it.
Mm.
and yet at the same time, I'm like, well, I offer a lot of free content,
Yeah.
like, there's plenty of free stuff out there. I make a lot of stuff that costs me money that I don't charge for. So, um,
Yes.
anyway, that's my own internal struggle of like trying to make a living off of information that I free.
Right.
Um, but so how does it affect the collective? I mean, if we're talking about like interconnectedness and interdependence as opposed to codependence, interdependence being like the ways that we need each other in healthy ways and the ways that we rely on each other and systems and structures that allow us to stay connected and not lose pieces of ourselves, which is when it like veers into codependency.
Mm-hmm.
Consent is, I think, how to grow these systems of interdependence without burnout, without us burning out. I was thinking last week about, I mean, this was just something that I was journaling about, how like artists and creatives, and I would also expand that into like, transformative justice practitioners and people who do things like what you and I do. Like, we are trying to create resources for people without being resourced ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We are under resourced,
Mm-hmm.
trying to create, like if we are depleted soil where plants are trying to grow, the plants are not going to be healthy. So if we grow these systems, like transformative justice is like new-ish, it's not totally new, obviously, but like the way that it's being talked about now, to the degree that it's being talked about now, and the ways that people really are trying to figure out like how does this work, and within like Twitter, and
Right.
what does this look like to hold people accountable outside of the law if we're trying to abolish police and abolish prisons. Like, what does it actually look like to hold people accountable, and what is the path to recovery and healing, both for people who have been harmed and for people who have harmed? Because if our ultimate goal is not to like ruin someone else's life, which I don't think it is, then what do these systems look like? And if the people building these systems are just depleted,
mm-hmm.
We can't also then, okay, so here's like another consent tie, which is that when we're operating from a scarcity mindset or a depleted place, or a mindset that says that there's just or if we're operating from like guilt, then what develops out of that is usually not like what develops out of that does not develop to its full form and state, and ultimately usually ends up being kind of harmful, like perpetual harm, because it's not healthy itself.
Yes.
And so consent, like maybe in this metaphor, consent is like the fertilizer. Like, we're fertilizing the soil so that stuff can grow out of it in a way that is then sustainable, and like the structure itself is already there. I think consent is where we are able to then rely on each other ethically and sustainably.
Right. I see so many people making choices off of, past consent or assumed consent from people, So I love the idea of more people knowing tools or feeling confident using tools to figure out consent in the moment and know what that means, because I do see so many people talk about the word consent only specifically in certain contexts, usually having to deal with sexuality or sexual spaces, or just like in touch, when there's like so many other spaces that consent is healthy consent is good, and
Or
I love, huh?
either sex, or it's like these legal contracts.
Right. Yes.
In between, that's just our interpersonal, ongoing daily lives and how we interact with each other.
Yes. Yes. I love that. And I love that you brought up, transformative justice stuff, because when I, earlier this morning when I got up, I had posted a little question box for people to ask questions in, and actually, one of the questions it's going to go over your face, so I'm not going to leave it up super long.
Okay.
But the question that was brought
Oh,
up, how is consent and conflict connected in this course?
ooh. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. I I know that they are connected, um,
Mm-hmm.
and yet I'm also like very much not a like conflict mediator.
Mm-hmm.
My course really focuses on like us individually unlearning and and reprogramming um how we think about consent. Uh, and so conflict, I think I think if I'm thinking about this in terms of like rhetoric around transformative justice, this class is more centered toward like the idea of abolishing the cop in your head.
Okay.
You
Yep.
know,
Mm-hmm.
really about like the internal work that it takes, and then the trauma informed piece of it
Yeah.
through in my experience has helped so much with how I approach conflict, because I'm able to really assess like where is this person on that polyvagal ladder of hierarchy, like
Yeah.
coming from for them. Is this their trauma response? What attachment style of mine is being active right now? So like being
Yeah.
able to conflict from that perspective, and then also having the language that I teach through these consent frameworks to like gauge the situation in the moment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think conflict plays in with this course. It's not going to be like a conflict resolution course or like training in conflict mediation for sure. That's not my area.
And it's such a hard area. It's definitely, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, like it's powerful and feels a little scary. And but I think scary in a good way to like be openly talking about our opinions on this. And um my sex work and modeling page, I was a lot louder about conflict and transformative justice style things than I have been on my growth arc page.
Mm-hmm.
But I am so interested in this and actually have been considering just like I started the growth arc thinking about non-monogamy and interpersonal relationship spaces, which is why I love this boundary and consent class, and it goes into that. But I'm like, oh my gosh, do I need to go get retrained on conflict transformation
Mm-hmm.
and go, because there's so much getting in the way of a lot of people's safety in wanting to try other things because of conflict. And so I think it's a really awesome way to touch on how having an understanding of your ideas of what your consent and your capacity is also a huge tool in conflict and understanding where other people are in their spaces of conflict, because it's such a messy thing we do as humans. Like conflict is such a funny like big thing.
Yes, you're also making me think of like I think where conflict ties in with this course, and this is like directly quoting um, a student slash friend. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the way that like navigating conflict when you have these tools can actually make the conflict into like an intimacy building moment and a
Yeah.
trust. Like if what how do you create space for your participants? Uh-huh, that's a great question. um so yeah, I think the like viewing conflict as like an opportunity to actually connect on a deeper level, um that's maybe where this course can like talk about that intersection. Space for participants in the workshop when tough emotions come up. That's a great question. My approach is to move really slowly through those moments, and I am working on slowing down myself. So that's like those are moments where I think as a group, trying to slow down and really breathe, and also ask the, well, for sure, offering that cameras never have to be on. These classes are recorded for the students. If they need to leave and take care of themselves, they can watch the recording later. Like that accessibility is for sure built in. If someone wants to stay and continue and be present, I think the conversation would then turn into like, where are you feeling this in your body?
Mm-hmm.
What's coming up for you? Maybe you want to journal about it a little bit, and bringing it, like really bringing it back. What does this physically feel like for you? What does it feel like? Are you feeling, pressure in your chest? And then also using those frameworks, especially the yes to no spectrum. That's where that's the one that I made up. And like what I'm going to have people do is like map out their own yes to no spectrums, and also using that map, talk about like, when I'm in this space, these are the physical sensations that come up. And so being able to then like return to that and be like, oh yeah, I'm like in this space.
Yeah.
So yeah, just getting like really noticing. That's I think the key.
Absolutely. And I replay so many spaces in my life where I can see how I was trying to myself communicate some of those things to people, but I could see how this course will give people some more words and some more gentle ways to talk about that yes no spectrum, and to really help communicate like what's going on inside of themselves physically, emotionally, and like what's happening. I think is such an important space in interpersonal relationships, but spaces, and like how to transfer that out is just so important. Do you have any I love this. I just want to tell people, like, if you have more questions, feel free to just put them
Yeah,
in there.
great.
The question box thing can work, but it covers up Mia's face. I don't leave it up too long. If we see questions come through, we can just pause. One of my other questions for you that I had sent this morning was, after this course, like, what do you have as like future goals for yourself, or for like how to transform past this class?
Ooh, well, past this class. Well, what I'm looking forward to is like people taking this class and other classes of mine, and like kind of building something of a community. And
Mm-hmm.
I recently found out what Discord is. Do you know about
Yeah.
Discord? Okay. So the idea that I had was that it would be really cool for like students and clients and anyone who like finds my work impactful, that and also Patreon subscribers, because I have starting at $5 a month. I have a Patreon that's like a kind of DIY learning space, like learn at your own pace thing. And then you also get discount codes to my classes. So like if you sign up for the Patreon at $5 a month, you immediately get 25% off of the class, which is like, it would take whatever, like 2 years or something to get. You can access the course through the link in my bio or through my website, sharetheloadinc.com. It has its own tab. So it says 6-week boundary and consent course. I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
You were talking about Discord in your clients. Yeah.
Like, okay, so 2 people who found my work, actually, I found out, started dating.
Ooh, I love that.
I know. So what I'm looking forward to, kind of as this expands and like more people end up involved, is that there would actually be like an online community, whether it's Discord or whatever, where like people who really feel a resonance with this, or like an affinity with this, would be able to talk to each other and like meet each other and find each other. And I'm also looking forward to kind of bringing my performance. I used to be a performer and a performance artist and a theater person. And so like bringing that back into my life in a way that feels like it's, you know, interacting with this work. I'm working on like developing a character who's like this kind of like sexy consent teacher person, who, and then also possibly like an actual consent wizard where like I would like show up, and a really good friend who writes sketches and like makes videos and stuff. And so that's kind of what I'm looking forward to in the next year is like intertwining my creative life back into this work, because they've felt pretty separate. Like I haven't kind of like, whoa, I was an artist like a year ago. What happened, you know? So I'm trying to figure out how I can like weave them into each other.
I love that. That's definitely one of my goals too, to try to connect my full self into the growth arc, because I feel like I have had to, or, you know, I probably societal pressure put on this like professional hat and stay in this like lane of like educator. But like the only reason I was able to do the growth arc is because so many people followed my journey through polyamory and non-monogamy through sex work and modeling, and then they just followed me, you know. So it's like, how do we hold these things together?
Another thing, I mean, this is probably its own whole other like live or podcast or something, but I think a lot about sex and intimacy as an art form, like
Oh yes.
craft themselves, and you know, being able to like access flow, like creative flow, through that kind of connection. And especially when we're talking about polyvagal theory, like interconnectedness, you know, like using sex and intimacy as a medium for creative self-expression.
Yep.
You know, where my heart is, I think.
Yes, yes. Well, we're gonna have to like log off and keep talking about that for sure. Definitely something I've been trying to build and been doing, and like want to find more like-minded people that want to like build stuff like that. So that's awesome. And that's something that I love about how we connected with Minachi, and like now here we are, and you know, we have some people. I think that, you know, one of my goals with the growth arc space was to also try to create a community. And I feel like I've definitely been able to, at least in 2019, there was a really awesome group in Minneapolis that was meeting together, and I still feel very held by them. But one thing I wanted to do, or like, you know, how do we all communicate together in the same way? How do we do this? And one of the big things is like, if we don't all have the same understanding of consent, how are we going to understand how to move together? So how do I get all the people in this community to go take this class so then we can all move together? Or how do I get everybody to take the Minachi's NVC class? Because I want us all to be able to have the same tools to talk with each other. And so I think like it's been really awesome to watch people finally, you know, push all of this online, because it does make it a lot more accessible for us all to be able to do this. So I'm really excited for your course. I will also put up a swipe up on my page after I save this video. So if anybody wants to try to connect there, but it is, I don't have a link tree set up right now, but I will put, you know, make sure that people are connected to you so they can find your course. Is there any last minute things you'd like to say before we log off?
No, I think we covered a lot in a short span of time. And I really appreciate you doing this with me, Andy, and sharing your platform. And I'm so glad that we connected. And the way that we connected, I think, carries a lot of meaning as well. So very grateful.
Yes, it's so nice to see you. And I do want to apologize for using the wrong pronoun before I introduced you. That is a huge like misstep, and that's a not thing that I should do. So I apologize, but I will see you after this. And anybody that is like thinking like, oh, that could be good for me. I know that Mia gave me some percentage off I'll put that on there too. So if you want to take some percentage off one of the course things, and I've really, really look up to and think it's awesome that you offered, a sliding scale for people, because I do think that's something people in our professions need to be more aware of and doing and being loud about it, because I even need to redo my own pay structure on my website instead of just talking about it. And so it's really awesome to see people that I look up to doing that in a really intentional way. And I think that you have done a good job doing that. So it's so good to see you. Thanks for coming on here and having, pushing me to do a live, which I haven't done since last May. And I'll see you soon.
Oh, I will mention is that I also have a workbook. I have a digital book, and I also have paper copies. So it's actually, I have one right here.
Cool.
This is my workbook, and it looks like this on the inside. And so those are available through my website too.
Awesome. So the workbook, is that something that people can get access to if they're a Patreon as well?
If they're a Patreon subscriber, they get a discount code to everything in my site. So yeah, you would get a discount on the workbook, both paper and digital. And if you sign up for the course, for the 6-week course, you automatically get a discount code for a free workbook, digital workbook, a free digital one.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thank
well,
you.
Have a great afternoon there, on the West Coast.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. I'll talk to you in a minute.
Bye.
Bye.
Anybody that was thinking that seemed like a cool thing that they would be interested in, I would highly recommend, going and looking at Mia's website, checking out their Patreon, and if none of that is, available or accessible to you, the workbook seems like a really awesome space to start. Those of you who are part of the Growth Arc community that logged in, it was very, very good to see your name pop up. I miss you so much, and I will see you again soon.